up, creating a lot of tension in the face. And really gently relaxing. And doing that one more final time, creating a lot of tension everywhere. It's like you're making everything really, 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 really small, really little, really tiny, 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 tiny. And when it cannot be stressed more, really gently relax and see how far you can bring this relaxation. See how far you can allow yourself to release, to relax, to let go. And if you find natural to close your eyes, you can go ahead and do that. Otherwise, just bring a soft gaze into the eyes and continue that process of relaxation. So we went through a spectrum of creating tension and now seeing to a cellular level, how much can I just open and sense the space within. And we'll begin with our bellies, letting your belly be as soft as it can be. We hold so much tension in our bellies. And get curious about the space within the internal systems. Get curious about the space between your belly button and your spine. See if you can sense which organs are active. Getting curious about the expansion of the breath. And the ripple effect it has on your internal system. And notice if there's an area within the body, within the Annamaya Kosha, that could use some of that relaxation. Letting the breath bring you home into the body. And if you find that there is a space in the body that feels uncomfortable or tense or rigid, or somewhere that is calling your attention for any reason, perhaps it's useful to imagine that this space in the body is like ice, rigid, stale, stagnant, cold like ice. And as you bring presence and awareness, that loving awareness that contemplates, that holds, that brings compassion, see if by bringing awareness into that space, that ice can begin to melt into water. There's no radical shift. It's a natural shift of melting. Same element, same water, just a different state of being. Nothing too radical or mystical, simply shifting the state from ice to water. And so if you find this useful, you can also take it on an energetic level. Noticing the quality of energy of right now, this moment, and letting the breath bring you closer into the experience. See if bringing a slight smile into your face creates a shift for your nervous system. When we smile, we signal our nervous system that it's okay to let the guard off. It's okay to be here, safe. Which allows us for a deeper exploration of our internal world. And so here's where you can really play with internal energetics. We've been shifting ice to water. And perhaps the more you allow yourself to be in the spaciousness inside, that water may shift to vapor. From ice to water to vapor. And it doesn't matter on which state the water is. It will always be water. Just in a different state, a different form that can morph and change according to conditions. And so what we work in this workshop is learning to create those internal conditions so that we can flow according to our internal world. So that we can determine what are the circumstances. Based on the guidance and the direction of the heart. And so may the subjects that we discuss in the next hours allow us to come even deeper into our own self-realization and our service in the world. And may the resistances that we may encounter be signals of where to look. And may the sharings that we have together collaborate in our mutual growth and evolution. I'm really grateful that you decided to show up this morning. And whenever you feel like it may be a good time to open your eyes, you can do so. You can remain in meditation throughout the class. I will say warm welcome to everybody here. It's so nice to see your faces and get a little bit of catch-up time. And I think all of us have taken a version of this, so it will be more like a review and then expanding into the areas that we didn't go into. want to open with this quote from a Buddhist teacher. He says that as we engage in the practice of discovering space, and that can be internal space, but it can also be the space in between, we should develop the feeling of opening ourselves out completely to the entire universe. We should open ourselves with absolute simplicity and nakedness of mind. This is the powerful and ordinary practice of dropping the mask of self-protection. And as I was preparing for this workshop, because even though I know it to the core and I understand the structures really well, I still struggle with them, and I still see, you know, oh, this layer is blocking me from perceiving reality accurately or from seeing another accurately because it's based on my interpretation of the other in the world. And the more I allow myself to prepare for this workshop in a way that feels authentic and go through the shame in a way of seeing how these layers affect me, the more I notice that they're just masks of protection. And it's just so painful in a way, because this nakedness of mind that this teacher speaks of is what I would love to experience, the sense of like freedom and connection. And so, yeah, I would love for us to think for a moment collectively, how does it feel to wear a mask? And how does it feel when we can take it off? And what's the sense of relief and peace if that comes when we can drop off the mask? I added new pictures also. I hope you enjoy those. So the theme, as we know, is that although we won't be doing asana, it is an internal inquiry of yoga and creating that union from the pieces that we had left without, or set the sense of separation within, and the sense of rejection within, and using yoga as that union within. So I'm still using the title from the retreat, Swadhyaya, and the quest to the essence of being, and a welcoming in an open and awake and compassionate way, what that may mean in terms of exploration. And the more I want to go over the subjects, the more I realize that it is an embodied inquiry. And that's what I was perhaps trying to convey when I said how painful it is for me to realize my masks. And I think that's actually good as a teacher and a facilitator, to recognize that it's not a master's discourse as in like, oh, I know all these layers and let me tell you what the layers are, but can I even see the layers within myself? And am I willing to break through them and expose myself so that the other can see that it's true? Does that make sense? It's that embodied learning, not repeating, but actually feeling, wow, there is this mask, there is this layer. What happens if I allow myself to experience the vulnerability beneath it? Does that make sense? How this can be embodied learning instead of an intellectualizable process. So I have this structure proposal. We can go, I think, yeah, we'll kind of play it by subject, but I was hoping that we could get a break from 11 to 11:10 so that we could stretch, go to the loo, eat something, whatever you need to do, and then come back so that we can finish by 12:30 and have like I would love actually to have a group discussion, because as opposed to how I usually teach this workshop, I usually teach this workshop for beginners and for people who are just starting to delve into their spiritual journey, and they get curious and they want to know more about themselves. And for me, it's such a blessing to have y'all as yoga teachers and yoga educators, and have this, like, I feel it's so enriching for us to come together and discuss together. So I hope I can leave enough time for us to discuss and talk. So as you already know, and I will bring back this metaphor, which is so useful, of Mount Meru, and how there is this time in history where the powers of the good and the seeming evil, the demonic powers and the divine powers, need to come together in order to release the Amrita, or the nectar of immortality. And this story, or this this tale of the churning of the ocean of consciousness, and that alchemical process that we enter when we decide that all of our inner resources have to come together in order to release that which will give us life. So in a way, in the cycle of transformation, that like fertile void where we can remember what our inner resources are, get them to work, and have the darker parts of us and the lighter parts of us, and lighter in the sense of more noble parts of us, and perhaps those masks, those wounded parts of the self, those forgotten parts of the self, come together so that we can unleash the internal power that will return and restore our worlds. So that's the invitation for today. And we've gone through this question before, but I would love for us to take just a moment to revisit what freedom means right now. If I look at my life right now, almost a month after teacher training, arriving to our different places and locations and integrating the experience, what does internal freedom mean? Taking a time to reflect what does freedom continue to mean. And so the premise is that if we are willing and able to see what is within, and remember what are the motives that drive us, and acknowledge, and there can be more self-containment and self-love. In a way, it is self-love because it's an incorporation of all the different elements that are playing within, and nothing gets unseen. Then there can be access to that unlimited potential, that Amrita from within. So one thing that I think I didn't go over when we had our workshop together is this structure of the mind. And I couldn't find the whiteboard. I was like the last 10 minutes looking everywhere for the whiteboard, and I couldn't find it. But I'll try to signal with my hands. So this structure of the mind as the conscious mind, which is what we think that we know, right? And the unconscious mind, which are all those hidden motives, whether they're based on benevolence or hurt, they're still unknown. But also this idea that Carl Jung brought into the psyche of the supraconscious, and the supraconscious filled with all the synchronicities and all the blessings and the flow of grace that comes in unexpected moments, and that both of them are available. And this idea of human potential being this rooted tree in that fertile soil, in that density of matter that can then reach up and give fruit in the heavens. I really resonate with that. How do we root to rise literally in our internal world to have access to both? And without those roots, the fruit will never be fertile, right? And so, something to think about. Jack Kornfield, a Buddhist teacher that I really take a kin on, he says that free, and on the subject of freedom, free is not free from feelings, but free to feel each one and let it move on, unafraid of the movement of life. So this story that Horace was telling us of the monk that used to get afraid of everything, and his father sends him to a monastery, and then he deals with his anxiety, and he goes, hello anxiety, when anxiety comes up, or hello fear, when fear comes up. It actually reminds me of the Rumi poem, The Guest House. Would somebody like to read it? Somebody feel like they want to read Rumi's poem? Mm-hmm.
The Guest House by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house, empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
Thank you, Viv. So how much we reject the feelings that arise every day, every minute, and what would happen if they actually get greeted and integrated as messages or guides from beyond. I spoke to you about the cycle of emergent conditions, which is one of, like, I swear to God, the saving graces in my life, of understanding that this polarity in reality, where something can seem good or can seem bad, can be pleasant or can be unpleasant, and there's always going to be the other one after the other one, if that makes sense. The cycle of emergent conditions, as one emerges, the other one emerges, conditions emerge, and we tend to attach to those that feel pleasure, or that give us pleasure, that gives us a sense of elation and well-being. But when other conditions arise that aren't as pleasurable, or you need to get your car towed and you need to pay $3,000 for residency, and all of these things happen, I'm talking of myself obviously, but we all have our things. How do we deal with that? And that's where the real gold is at, right? So the 8 worldly dharmas is part of this teaching. Like, pleasure will inevitably always come hand in hand with pain. And it gives such warmth to my heart to actually see them walking together, like hand in hand, as well as gain and loss. So there's moments where there is a lot of gain, and there's moments where we need to let go, and there's a loss. Moments where we shine in fame, and then something is inaccurate, or we slip as a normal human being, and there's a sense of disgrace. Moments of praise and moments of blame, and they always come together. And the more the heart can open to that reality, the more enriching life is, right? Rather than always seeking for the pleasure, how do we open to the reality of life and let that be the carrier for grace, and let that be the carrier for peace? And that has been my exploration this 9 days. Like, wow, I'm feeling all of these difficult feelings to feel almost unbearable. If I contain them, what happens? And what I discovered was this unshakable equanimity. It wasn't nice, but it was peaceful, and that was beautiful. So that guided me to, again, who am I, and who is it that is experiencing all these waves, and what is that unshakable ground? Or Paul Tillich, a Christian mystic, and a beautiful work, Paul Tillich, in The Cloud of Unknowing, he speaks of what's the ground of being, like what's the rock that we hold onto in life, and what is that unshakable force within. And So we can call it the Atman, the essence of our being. I'll refer several times in this workshop to the work of Tatrayeya, which is a beautiful book. If you haven't read it, I highly suggest it. Is one of the gems of Advaita Vedanta, because it really points to who is it that is seeing, what is that Vijnana, Maya Kosha, or the witness. He speaks of the one God who shines within everything. So it's not that it shines in this situation, but it doesn't shine when I need to tow my car, right? Who is formless like the cloudless sky, is the pure, stainless self of all. And what does it mean to be stainless, to be pure, without any doubt? That is who I am. So in truth, who am I? And in the process, who am I? Because the ego will naturally and by design will always look for a state of homeostasis, will always look for a state of a pretense of balance, but it's never balanced, because as we know, as teachers and as human beings in the path of growth and transformation, what's the thing that never changes? It's impermanence, it's change. And if we can open to that, there will be growth. If we resist that, looking for this false state or this false sense of homeostasis, which actually stagnates us, that's our ego. So growth, the process of expanding awareness, begins as we gain the capacity to see, contain, and transmute our own energies, like the phoenix. And it's amazing the plethora, the feast of metaphors that all these beautiful traditions give us, right? Like the phoenix dies and gets reborn. The butterfly turns from a caterpillar that wants to eat everything and shit everything and ruin all the plants so that it can feed itself, to going into this like really tight container. Acid destroys it, and then a butterfly comes out, and then it can go and pollinate flowers. And isn't that the metaphor of our psyche in development? And so the more that I see my own life and my own caterpillarness and selfishness, the more I can see that there's, oh my God, that's self-sabotage, because there's this lotus logic. I'm calling it lotus logic. Like, the soul will always seek for the highest expansion. The heart wants to open. That's the logic. It will go through this mud and muck and shit and grow as this stainless lotus. That's the promise. That's what every tradition says. The more I hate the muck, the more I resist the muck, the more I'm like, no, I don't want to pay this bill, the less I blossom, right? I think that's self-sabotage. That's how I'm seeing it now. So what is the lotus promise is knowing ourselves through our source, through our creator, through the essence of our being. And we have all these names and frameworks to refer to that. And I think I told you when we had our class here in the Essence of Being retreat, but I'll say it again because it's resonating as true right now. My favorite name for God is Mysterium Tremendum ad Fascinam, which is in Latin, and it refers to this awe-inspiring, fascinating mystery. And to see the car being towed, I'll keep using that example because it's the freshest on my life, or to see my long distance relationship, or to see the struggles of my daily life as part of that mystery. Wow, that's miraculous, and that guides me deeper to the essence. So we're talking a lot of integration, right? And a lot of bringing together, and as Pema Chodron says, welcoming the unwelcome. And Frank Ostesaki, who's also a Buddhist teacher, but he's also a grief counselor, and he speaks a lot of that integration process. So he says, to be whole, we need to include, accept, and connect all parts of ourselves. And I think there's a logic to it. I don't think I'm reading too much into it. Like it's a process, right? Of like, I include you, I accept you, and I will connect with you. That's the yoga, and accepting those conflicting qualities. That's what we do in the guide sessions, right? It's like, oh, there's this part, and this part wasn't aware that there's this part, and they don't seem to want to communicate, or they may even be unaware that the other exists. So how do we create that connection and bring together that seeming incongruency of our inner and outer worlds, how we see ourselves and how we see the other and the world? And this one is a really hard one to swallow, coming from monastic living, because you always strive for perfection and excellency. And I think even if not monastic living, I think all of us have this sense of like perfectionism. And what is wholeness? Because it's not that like perfect image. It means that no part gets left out. We did our guided meditation. Okay, so I love to complexify and create labyrinths, and this I think sets a really open tone, in the sense that the ego is a universal structure, universal mind structure to deal with the world, to relate to the world, to relate in the world, and to relate with ourselves. And the pretense is from my studies in psychoanalysis and the coming together of Lacanian work and Kleinian work and Freudian work and Jungian work, to have the ego be a universal mind structure that will shift and shape according to culture and epoch and era and values and whatnot. But in terms of a structure, it may have the same layers. The layers may have different tendencies, but we will all block that which is painful. We will all be in relation to our womb and our mother. We will all, you get the picture, that there's this sense of universality of it. But the master signifiers will shift and shape. So the beginnings of the ego start as a response to that which seems unknown, or that which is unknown, and therefore might be threatening to our little selves. Everything seems overwhelming as a child, as a newborn baby, and consciousness will find ways to protect itself from that which seems overwhelming. And so that is actually kind of that's sweet, right? That development of a world protection. And we spoke on the workshop here, and I think oh, Kristen's coming. I think I explained it perhaps differently when we were there. I'm gonna say hi, Kristen. Kristen, welcome.
Thank you.
It's so good to see you.
Good to be
here. We're kind of a little bit far in advance, but I will take the opportunity, because you already took the workshop, to just continue, so that we'll have a break in mid of the session, like 11 time, yeah, 11-ish, and then we'll come back together and finish at 12:30. Okay, it's nice to have you. Thank you for joining. So this, back to the sense of forgetfulness, we're talking about the development of the ego, and that it's based on this coming into the world, coming into a womb, getting born in a world that seems unknown, and you come from the mystery and from, it's unexplainable, but there's this sense of expansion, and there's this sense of love, and there's this sense of formlessness and a sense of interconnectedness. And all of a sudden, we're in this tiny body and we don't know how to communicate, and we have all these needs to get met. And sometimes our caretakers don't know how to interpret those. And so we begin to slowly forget where we come from in order to cope and be in this world. And that is the natural response of a developing human, going through this process of forgetting and then remembering where we come from. But that's a very intense period of adaptation. To process all of the stimuli that come and appear in the world. And so the insight of psychoanalysis as to how we deal with that, I find it really valuable. It's very similar to that of a permeable membrane in biology, this cell full of lipids and enrichments and intelligence that decides this we can welcome because this will be good for our development, the development of the cell. This we can definitely take in. Ooh, this seems like, I don't know, let's push it out. And that permeability of consciousness to say, I will take this, I won't take that, kind of is like the 8 worldly dharmas, right? Like, okay, yes to pleasure, yes to fame. Oh, mommy likes this, I will take it. Oh, mommy doesn't like this, I won't take this. This permeability of consciousness as the intelligence of the self, semi-permeable membrane. And I love this phrase of the Song of the Avadut book. It says, in terms of that choice that consciousness decides to make, as oh, this is okay to let in, this is not okay to let in. Oh mind, why are you so deluded? Why do you run about like a frightened ghost? Become aware of the indivisible self. Be rid of attachment. Be happy and free. And that is the delusion, right? To think that something can be welcomed and something that can't be unwelcome, that can't be welcomed. And in that process of choice, we develop these 4 functions. Feeling, we learn to feel. I don't know if you have the ability to right now kind of like regress back to those early childhood sensations of being still beyond prior to language, and remember, how did it feel like to begin to feel? How did it feel like to begin to think, to develop thought, to process the world? How did it feel like to create sensation and to become aware of what was pleasurable and what was loving and what felt like rejection and not okay? And how did we begin to develop our intuition and to express our intuition? And these functions that we have the privilege to experience as living beings in this world, how did they get shaped and where did they emerge from? And it's such a delicate and tender space within, right? And in this process of choosing and rejecting what comes into our consciousness, we begin to identify with our form. This is who I am. Lacan, this French psychoanalyst, he talks about the mirror stage in childhood development and how it mirror stage because that moment where mommy or daddy or grandma or whoever is the caretaker puts up the mirror and shows you your form, and she says, or he says, that's you. And you go, that's me. And we identify with this form and forget that we are pure awareness. And there's this like such an interesting and enriched and full and dense subject, because of course, as we go through life, it's important to determine who we are and to know that, oh, this is my form and that's boo-boo. So I don't go around sniffing and licking and, you know, I am this form and boo-boo is that form. There's a difference between this guy who lives in Kansas City and my husband. There's a difference between my bank account and my mom's bank account. Like this differentiation is so important as we go through life and development. But can we trace back that sense of union? Can we go back to that sense of open, free, loving awareness? And what happens is that it is so shocking for the mind and the neuron, how do we call the neuron patterns, to deal with that paradox of being all and one at the same time, that we forget. And so we develop this sense of lack because we forgot of where we came from. And it's almost like we have these pieces of the puzzle and we took away that sense of unity. We took away that sense of the Atman, of pure consciousness. And so the puzzle has all these pieces, but because we've gotten this one piece, we try to fill the puzzle and put another piece, like every single strategy we develop, whether it be food or shopping or addiction or sex or relationships or whatever those tendencies we develop are, in order to cover up that lack. And the only piece of the puzzle that will actually complete itself is that unity that we forgot, that Atman that we forgot, that sense of like, oh, I remember where I come from. And we all come from that. And so while we remember that, every attempt we do in life to fill this void will fail in a way, will show itself to be, it's deceptive. That's the self-sabotage, right? And so we went through this, the creation of the sensor as this agency that says, this is good for you, this is not good for you. Yes, this you should totally embrace. This seems a little bit icky. I don't know if mommy will like this. What will they think of you if you do this? Censor it, go back to what is acceptable. Or rebel against it, but it's still in relation to that principle. And this layer that the sensor is splits the mind into what we can know and what is okay to know, and what we should have never known and should never remember. And that's where psychoanalysis comes into the picture. Although I would love to expand this workshop at some point and add in the research of shamanic schools and mystery schools, because this work of psychoanalysis is not that new and not that cutting edge, because all of our ancestry as philosophers, and yoga is not excluded from that, although modern postural yoga, and we studied the history of it and how like complex it is, this philosophy and this school of thought of what can be known and what can't be known, what can be felt, what is not so pleasant to feel, this sense of consciousness containing the human experience is, and integrating is definitely not new, but psychoanalysis for Western thought was what kind of hit it, because the premise was, if you can accept what is going on and interpret it, something may get released, right? So all of these patients, primarily women, but then men also began to break that spell, were developing symptoms that didn't have a logical explanation. Although it did have a lotus logic, it did not have like a time and space explanation, right? Like crippling patterns of behavior that seem to come out of nowhere. And when these people were allowed a space to talk and express and get all of the things that weren't allowed to be said, spoken, and they were heard and they were given meaning, symptoms would disappear. And that's magical, because the system that was in place prior to that was kind of what the system we have now, right? Like, take a pill for this, cover up for this. So there's this two models of looking at humans. There's the human being as a machine, where, let's say, you need to glow, and so you'll get all of these medications and artificial ingredients to make you glow. Human being as a machine to how do you function properly, and if you're not glowing, we'll give you artificial coloring for you to glow, versus human being as a garden, or human being as this living creature. If you're not glowing, rather than try and attempt for you to glow again, can we look at, why are you not glowing? What's the cause of the discomfort? What's the cause of you not glowing? Instead of trying to put a fluorescent light inside and make you glow artificially. Does that make sense? It's going to the root of the discomfort, going to the root of the pain, and allowing it to be there and seeing what happens after. And it's always a mystery, and it's always magical, because the answers are always surprising. And I think if God has a quality other than being benevolent and loving and compassionate, is that it loves to surprise us in all these unpredictable ways. So I think psychoanalysis was tuning into that in terms of, let's free associate, let's let everything come out, and let's see what map comes out of it that guides you to your own heart, and let from there on something get revealed, right? It's like a guide session. So once the code is decoded, space opens up, something new can come out. And so what they began to see is that these traumatic memories from childhood get frozen within us. And so even though we grow older and we experience different things and we grow through certain challenges, those pieces stay like an SD card in our hard drive. And when an alarm goes off, that piece is activated. And so this is what creates a pattern of behavior and a pattern of coping with life, that we think that we have the tools in order to deal with something, but if we don't look at that SD card and the information that it has, there's going to be a glitch in the system. I gave you the example of my mom going to her phone while we were playing, and me creating the sense of abandonment. That's a really like innocent happening in life. And imagine of all of the events like this that created small SD cards that then we stored, that tell us stories of how we are unworthy, or how we are undeserving, or how we are, or the opposite, how deserving we are and how entitled we are, and both stories play out. And what is really interesting to me right now is that at the time where psychoanalysis was created, human beings were taught and expected to be productive machines, to be perfect, right? And to be perfect wives, perfect husbands. It was Vienna, it was this time, 1900s, where we were kind of attempting to be this type of human being. That's very correct. And so the tendencies that were coming out and that were being repressed were more like the wild pieces of our humanity as mammals, right? Sexual drives, violent drives, greedy drives. And now, 2021, we kind of flipped the coin, and all of these drives are actually like celebrated in a way, and the wildness is out. And so what is repressed is the goodness, and what is repressed is the intelligence, and what is repressed is the nobility of spirit. And it's so interesting how it flipped, right? Like most, not all, but like I look at Netflix, and what is available is all this violence and conspiracy theories and stories of greed and stories of rape and pedophilia, and like it's almost like that's now what's in the open, whereas before that was repressed. But where is the goodness, and where is the love, and where is the unity, and where is the inspiration, and where is the divinity? That's what's gotten kind of repressed. And we went through this, but in a way, that's what we experience in a guide session, right? Like there's one conflicting part, another one, they come together, they speak, and all of a sudden we begin to see the goodness in both, and the desire to make it better in both, and how both are really innocent in a way, or in their own way, and that's where the goodness begins to come out, and the self-acceptance and the self-love. So once those codes, or those codes, it's funny, I was talking of the mind as a machine, because a machine and technology operates in codes, right? And we are our own technology. So once a code is decoded, there's a release. And this release came in a meaning-making system. And we talk about this in yoga, and I know Janelle refers to it a lot in maps of meaning. And that is when we start to see and interpret our events in daily life as carriers and as guides of meaning. And when we can see through frameworks of interpretation, and we begin to get curious as to what is happening in our lives, and stop comparing to the external world, but rather build compassion for our own journeys, and move from being a victim to like, oh my God, this is kind of all happening for me to wake up, and I'm not a victim of this. There's a passage to freedom here. How can I begin to see this world in a meaningful way, and shift from being an automatic to being a sovereign being? We touched on this. We know the story of the farmer by now, and this capacity to say, is this really good luck? Is this really bad luck? Who knows why the car got towed? Who knows why this month was so expensive? Who knows? It certainly doesn't look as good, but it's certainly not bad. Who knows? So I would actually love for us to take a break right now, and then we dive into the structuring layers of the self. Does that sound good to everybody? Let's take a break now and come back in 10 minutes. And then we'll dive deep into the layers as they are. So I'll see you in 10 minutes. I'll leave the Zoom here, so you just go back to it. See you soon.
Hey, Kristen. Hey, Jenny. I turned off my video because I was taking a nap. Don't tell Prema. I can't hear you.
I was muted that whole time. Sorry. I won't tell Prima. Hi, Jenny. How's your body? How are you feeling? How's your world? I can't hear you. Kelly.
Yeah.
Hey, Jenny.
Hi.
Hey.
Yeah,
How
I'm
you
good.
doing?
I feel good now. It was just that weird coming off the high of being there.
Totally. Yeah. And I also, like, at the end of the thing, I developed, I got home and I was like, oh my gosh, I gained 20 pounds and got shingles. I'm like,
If you were here when I said that God is a surprise.
Right.
Were you
Yeah.
here?
I don't know.
So I was saying that one of the qualities of God that I can perceive more now than before is that, yes, absolutely loving, ever present, all pervasive, but surprising. And you
Yeah.
have a beautiful surprise of your
Yeah.
showing up. That's awesome.
Oh, definitely. I agree with that. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for this. This is amazing. Getting all my notes here. I love it.
That's awesome. Good to
I've just started reading The Body Keeps the Score.
This is the Bessel van Bessel's book, right?
Yeah, and so a lot, like, it refers to so much of this. Like, just I'm like 6 chapters in, and it's touched on just a lot of this already.
That's amazing. What would you say is the greatest link you can see?
Oh, when you were speaking about the women, like in the 1900s, when the women were showing those symptoms of, but when they were able to talk about, symptoms of illness, and then when they were able to talk about whatever trauma they experienced, or just maybe express themselves, then those symptoms went away. I think that was like in the first chapter of that book.
That's amazing, because I've never read that book, but I saw it yesterday here and I picked another one. And now that you said this, I will actually read it this afternoon, or start reading it. We could even do like a book club with our Sangha.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
That'd be super cool.
Yeah, I know.
A book group.
I would love that.
I'd really want to do a book club. That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Have you read the one Jenny's talking about?
No, I have not.
The body keeps the store. The body keeps the score.
Mm.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
We were flossing.
We didn't want to just like be flossing on that.
I have snacks, so I hope you don't mind.
Yesterday, I joined to a live on Instagram from this woman. She's an older woman in Costa Rica, and she was giving a satsang in Spanish on Instagram, and she doesn't call it satsang, but that's exactly how it felt like. It was truth being spoken. And so she was the only one in the camera, and she had like her ceviche with plantains, and she was like snacking, drinking wine, and talking, and people were commenting, and there was like 120 people, and I was one of them, and I stood from the moment it began to where it ended, and it was so awesome because everybody was commenting like, oh, I'm also eating ceviche and plantains, and like, such an interesting like quarantine satsang modality. So bring your floss.
And your radish. I have radish. I love radishes.
That's such a beautiful color. Radish is so pretty.
Yeah.
Take
Polished liquid rice.
and let's just talk about truth together as we do daily life stuff. Yeah, I often think of how Horace and Janelle speak of the uniqueness of Nexus being that they are not like sages on the stage, that they they live here and they share with us. And I come from a framework in which Shunya was always in his house, and unless there was a satsang or a class, and then he would come dressed in white and give a satsang and then leave. And before that started, he would have every meal with us, and it was like fun and sharing and whatnot. And I don't know, I can't remember what was the crack of like why he started to retreat and then come in dressed in white and then leave. And I think there's some value to retreating and having space, but also like just not losing our humanity, right? Like if you need a floss, then floss. It's Saturday.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make you less perfect, right?
Makes you more so. You have really clean teeth.
Exactly.
Grandma, you were talking about how you're having a couple of financial woes at the moment. Well, we just had the exact same thing where I went into the dentist and I have to go get a root canal. And I'm like, and
Yeah,
it's
we
just
thought
coming
it was
out of
going to be a
pocket.
filling, and then it ended up,
Awesome. And you love it.
But
And
with
You love it.
Oh my gosh.
No, I haven't seen
my God.
pictures of your house.
insurance doesn't cover it.
Oh, we don't have
I don't have
insurance.
insurance.
Oh, okay.
We're in Georgia. We don't have that here.
What? Georgia's not a place to get insurance, or what?
Ain't
Well,
nobody
we
is.
could pay for insurance,
But it'd be $500 a month.
well, and so for medical, and that's for medical insurance.
Yeah,
but
dental is.
that doesn't cover dental.
Yeah.
And then if we wanted to get dental insurance, I would have to wait, anywhere from 6 months to a year in order to be able to start using it.
And then 3 years for it to actually help with the root canal.
And at that point, it really only covers about 40% of what I would need.
Yeah.
So, I might as well just pay out of pocket for it. And the place has like some discount deal they're going to do for me to pay out of pocket.
But the moral of the story is that, we were like super stressed out about it yesterday. And then we were like, oh, well, there's also these payment plans, there's these other things.
Yeah.
And like my first thing was like, go straight to the comfort, like, okay, well, I have to go get a job, like a 9 to 5. And when our plan is to like start teaching yoga and doing things, and I was like, no, Nick, you go teach yoga, I'll get a job. And then we were thinking like, okay, let's take a breath. Like we still have a few months of savings. I can still try to teach and see how to make money. Because for me, it's new. I haven't made money teaching yoga yet. And so it's like, okay, I can give myself a couple months first before I go straight to the safety zone of that stagnation, right? Of that like perceived homeostasis of like, okay, I'll get a paycheck every 2 weeks to, but then will I be stuck in this job that I don't like for me personally, because it would be going and working at Whole Foods again, which was okay, but just not what I want to do. So thank you for that. We really needed this lecture today to have compassion for ourselves.
Thank you for sharing, because it's a time in which all of these themes are ever more present, right? Because of the confinements and lockdowns, and for us as yoga educators, the need to create new forms and new spaces in order to make a living, right? And what you just shared is, I think it's the turning point in a way of the initial response, which will always be the fight, flight, freeze. And in that, taking that and being like, am I broke? Do I have a shelter? Do I have my companion? Okay, nothing has happened yet. So how do we prepare for that to happen, right? Because I think that how I see it in my life is like, the crack hasn't yet happened, but I already see it. And so it triggers this response in the nervous system. but it hasn't yet happened. And so by the time that it gets here, I'm already like tackling everything, and it's not even here, right? But so I just think more power to we who want to have equanimity in our lives, because at least there's a little bit more space when decisions need to get made, right? Thank you for sharing. I'm glad that we are all related to these problems, and that we are all learning to tackle them in a way that can serve rather than cripple. Shall we move on, or would somebody like to say something else? Floor is open. Kristen's photo is like so vivid that I feel like she's looking at me, but she's actually, it's actually her photograph. But for the entire time I was talking, I thought it was her, and she was just like equanimously looking at me. I was like, oh my God, I really appreciate her like presence.
Yes, I feel the same way.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kirsten, for your loving awareness. Where is this? Right here. Okay, so we will now go into what the layers are. This is a Hilma Klint photograph from her painting. And I really, when I first saw this, and I was looking for a cover for the structuring layers of the self, it made perfect sense, because there's all of these layers, and there is this silver lining to it, and it made sense to me. And the fact that there's very defined colors, and then there's more subtle colors, as to there's more to it always. I really think this is a good picture for the workshop. And so we can see these layers just as the koshas. They can be sometimes more predominant, sometimes more subtle, sometimes more accessible, sometimes so difficult to tap into, and yet they are there nonetheless. And so the sensor, the reason why I put it first as the first structuring layer, not only is the first thing that we, actually it's not the first thing that we developed, that's the intrauterine subconscious, but the sensor first layer, because once we begin to censor things, it will be the primary layer filter through which we conceive reality. And it's the most active one, because we were in the womb once, and those patterns stay like the chip inside of our hard drive until we decide to change the code. But the sensor is the one agency that will filter every event. Does that make sense? Like the sensor, the first layer, because it's the most active one in our spiritual trajectory. And the sensor is that which will look for homeostasis. And as Viv was sharing, trigger response, trigger reactivity. We have an expense, oh, we need to look for a job. We have a situation, what's the most immediate thing that would bring homeostasis? And not that looking for a job would be something negative, right? Or like advertising more workshops, or asking for donations for the workshop, of like trying to, like, our financial well-being is very important in this day and age, but how to not default into that which stagnates our growth, but rather use that trigger as momentum and fulcrum to do what we want to do. And I see you both are like, yeah, that makes sense, because use that as a catalyst for growth, right? And so the conscious mind, before entering this process and looking within, will always be a slave to the unconscious mind. It's like the facade is a smiley face, and the one who is puppeteering the whole thing is the unconscious. Or like playing whack-a-mole, like you're trying to hit something, it comes out another way, you try to hit it again, it comes out the other way, and it's like this whack-a-mole trying to keep things in balance. But as Yeats' poem goes, the center can no longer hold. There's so many things happening, and the sensor is trying to keep everything down, and eventually there will be a crack. And that crack is usually, as Leonard Cohen says, where the light comes in, right? So the sensor tries to keep us in a false sense of okayness. And what happens is that because we are limiting or trying to repress that which is unpleasant, we also block ourselves from experiencing the grace and the opportunities that are coming through with that challenge. So we inhibit that which seems dangerous, and with that we also inhibit the greatest blessing that that brings, right? So we are the greatest inhibitors of this life process, and even that inhibition is part of the journey. That's the whole thing of awakening, that it was me all along blocking myself, and that was part of it. That didn't make me crippled or wrong, or that was even in and of itself consciousness discovering itself over and over again. And that realization fills you up with magic and the desire to, okay, let's do the work. If I am the greatest inhibitor, then I am the greater carrier of blessings in my life. And below the sensor, so we're moving into the intrauterine subconscious, which I've said before, this intrauterine, being in utero, being inside the womb of the mother, and even being in the conception of the idea of creating a child, in the conception of a couple or two human bodies coming together and creating this mystery of a baby, there is so much entailed in that field of awareness. And it's something that can be verbal, but it usually gets verbal in the personal subconscious. This field of the intrauterine subconscious is so energetic. It's one of those things where words don't matter, is the energetics that come with it, and all of the contradictory feelings that come with pregnancy, the worries, the joys, the expectations, the worries, the joys. On every layer of the life of the mother and and giving birth to a child. And I think that all of the koshas get involved in the intrauterine subconscious, how the mother's body is shaped and shifting, what relationship does the baby have to that, which energies are getting transmitted to the baby in the womb, what's the energetic body of the mother, how does that get translated into the child, what's the mental field of the mother, how does that get translated into a child, is there an access to witness consciousness, can the baby perceive that or no, is it blocked from it? The Anandamaya Kosha is that So this is something that I really value Jacques Lacan's work in psychoanalysis, because he speaks of how mother and child are one. And there is a large period of course, pregnancy. There's no question of how mother and child are entangled in one, and everything that happens to the mother, the baby will carry. But also, once the separation and the cutting of the cord happens, it doesn't usually happen energetically and mentally until we do inner work, right? So the physical cord can get cut, but the energetic, the mental, and all the layers still remain within us. So mother and child are one, and everything that the mother experiences, we get the ripple effects of. And this is a field that in nutrition studies, we delved in quite a lot, and I actually appreciate it, because is the field of epigenetics. And let's say mother has a deficiency in a vitamin or a protein, and so she needs to take some sort, or she is told to take some artificial thing to make up for that. And you will see later studies of how the adult who was once a baby, son or daughter of this mother, actually carries that same deficiency or toxicity from that thing that the mother had to take. It happens with physical substances. We will see it with addictions. We will see it with emotional tendencies. So the world of the mother gets translated to the world of the baby. And I kid you not, it's more pervasive than what we allow ourselves to notice and to see. The whole reason I became a nun, I found out later in life, was because my mom wanted to be a nun, and I had no idea. And I was like, oh, but I'm not doing it through the Catholic Church, I'm doing it through an ashram, and it's entirely different. But in principle, it's that same energetic field that gets so finicky and more than we allow ourselves to notice, because it would be kind of like shocking to realize how permeated we are from our parental fields. And it's one of those farmer tales. Good luck, bad luck, who knows? It's just what is happening. And the more we can embrace what is and make the best out of it, and use it in our favor and in our heroic journey, the better off we are. So there is in the intrauterine subconscious, and actually in the function of the sensor and its desire to return to homeostasis, very deeply in our psychology, there is a desire to get back into the womb of the mother. Now, physically, obviously, that's impossible. There's no way that that can happen. But energetically and mentally, there is a rooted desire in consciousness to go back to that union where things were safe, when we didn't have to face challenges, where everything was taken care of, where we didn't even have to chew or suck for our own food, but it came from this umbilical cord. And it does not matter whether it was a golden crib, and we talked about this in our teacher training when Kristen talked about the golden handcuffs. Like, it doesn't matter if we were served ghee and precious cow milk, or we were served alcohol and cigarettes. There still is that sense that the womb is the safe place, and we can disappear and all troubles will be lifted from us. And it's almost like this flip side of chakra 1 of wanting to just disappear and not deal with our humanity. And so when most of our intrauterine subconscious drives are attempts to recreate that sense of being back in the womb. So taking alcohol until we completely blur out and there's no cognition of what is happening. that's actually a recreation of being back in the womb, or like getting lost in the vortex of the obliteration of consciousness. That's actually an attempt to go back to the womb. Coley, I'm not talking about you, but sleep, like how we have our attempts in sleep. He's sleeping actually. And I'm actually struggling a lot with sleep right now because I can't seem to get a rhythm going. And I've said, no, I'm not going to take melatonin. I'm going to go back to it naturally. But I'm having difficulty falling asleep. And I know that there's this sense of like being super wired up and awake and alert because of, I think it was triggered because of being drugged, and then the break-ins happening in the house, and now I'm afraid somebody may break in, and like there's this sense of alertness and an incapacity to relish in the sweetness and the safety of sleep. And so it's not like the intrauterine subconscious is some sort of evil thing. How do we relate to those things that happened and that are in our biology and our psychology? So it is complex. And again, it's not good or bad. It is simply patterns that we develop. The intrauterine subconscious sets the beginnings of what then turn out to be the personal subconscious. And in a way, the personal subconscious, it is subconscious because a lot of these things don't get spoken or are not said clearly. But the intrauterine subconscious is more like, it's more unconscious than the personal subconscious. It's more unspoken than the personal subconscious, because the personal subconscious usually carries a lot of implicit messages of what our primary caretakers want, expect, or fear us to be, right? So every desire comes with fear. We want you to be a ballerina. We want you to be lawyer. We want you to be whatever you want, honey. Doesn't matter. So there's a lot of guidance or a lack of guidance, and with every desire comes the fear of what may happen to us. I've been delving into the work of Brené Brown. She's kind of super popular. I had no idea. And she speaks of vulnerability and shame, and how these she speaks of these layers in her own terms. And why I'm getting into this? Oh, because she speaks of how fear is this predominant perspective that we always have. She says of how she'll look at her children sleeping, and she's like in this heaven, just looking at the peace and the beauty. And it gives her this sense of expansion and goodness. And all of a sudden, she starts thinking of every possible threat and danger that could get to her children. And she speaks of this like negativity bias that we all have. And so in the personal subconscious and the development of our personality, and this is, the personal subconscious is super related to the Manomaya Kosha, where all of these sets of beliefs get formed of who we are. And those beliefs have a superiority side of how great I am and how great my parents or primary caretakers thought I was. And if I didn't have primary caretakers, then that defines something as well. It's very personal. And then also the shadow and the flip side of that superiority complex is the inferiority complex, and how I am not worthy and all of these things. And they're always in relation to each other. Just as pain and pleasure are in relation to each other, our superiority complex gets created to make up for the inferiority complex. And so this layer, even though we have, or if we do have brothers and sisters, or people who were growing up in the same circle of care with us, and we all got measured the same amount of milk, and we were all dressed exactly the same, and we all got the same attention, the outcome will be absolutely different based on the quality of attention and the focus and the projections that come from those caretakers. So I spoke of interference patterns, which is something that really intrigues me because it's so conflictive within my being. It's not as conflictive as it was before, but I still see the internal conflict. And I think guide sessions here are grace, because the interference pattern, and that's a term from quantum physics, two energies come together and they're supposed to create something, but they're not necessarily always cohesive, even though they may think they are. And so it creates some sort of like some sort of response within both of them to create something. So one energy may say, wow, Prema, you're such a daddy's girl. You're so good. Wow, Prema, you're so disorganized. How can you keep your room this way? You're so loving. You're so good to your brother. Wow, you're so selfish. Boom. Lands in my awareness. Who am I then? Am I good? Am I bad? Am I daddy's girl? Does that mean I shouldn't be mommy's girl? And I'm using their examples, the first ones that come to mind. I am free associating, but all of us have these conflictive ideas of who we should be. And what's fascinating to me is not only do they create conflict in our world and how others perceive us and want us to be, but then, and this is, I just think it's awesome, we as awareness and with our willpower receive this, and we don't take it for granted. We don't say, okay, this is what I will be. We make a choice, just as we make a choice as the sensor does. We make a choice and we say, okay, yes, I will content with this, or yes, I will say this because you said so, and that makes me a good girl and I will always be a good girl for you. Or I can say, you know what, actually, no, fuck you, I won't do this, and I rebel. But whether I say yes or I say no will always be in relation to that interference pattern. So, I don't know, think of like, and this is super stereotypical and gender rolled, but that's what I got. Pink walls, stuffed animals, super cute stuff. By the time that I am 14, all of that is no longer desirable. And so it's more like those bracelets that have like spikes, and like I'll be drawing like skulls in my book, and like it's rejecting the pink and saying yes to this dark thing, but it's in relation to the pink. It's rejecting the pink and saying no, but I'm actually saying yes because it's still in relation to that. And it's only until later in our process, in our development, that we can say, you know, actually no, but, or yes, but, or yes, and we can make our own choices and life decisions, not in relation to that pattern. But it takes a lot of inner work because our decisions will always come back to this personal subconscious and what we were told to be or not to be. But we have the choice, and they come from multiple layers. So of course the primary caretakers nuclear family system is of course it's the main base where all of these identifications get formed. But then we start visiting cousins and we start seeing uncles, and our uncles tell us, you look so ugly when you cry, or like, oh, isn't she such an intelligent girl, or like strong boy, or whatever like commands get told from an extended family system or neighbors, right? I have this client who has a boy she's a mother to this, like, he's 5, and every day he has a conflict with his neighbors, and we can start to see all of these identifications that he's forming, not based on what is happening at home, but based on the influence of these neighbors and the fact that she does not know until he comes and tells, right? Kindergarten systems, educational system is huge. I can't tell you enough how many teachers set failing patterns for classmates of mine in high school. Just because somebody wasn't good at grammar didn't mean that they weren't good at math or that they weren't good at art, and all of a sudden they're failed in an educational system, and or good at sports, right? Like, we all have these different sets of intelligences, and how many of my classmates resorted to drugs or alcohol because they couldn't fit into the mold of the educational system in one area, right? It's so sad. And then, of course, the social system. But we choose to identify with these projections. And we begin to tap into the collective subconscious from the personal subconscious. And I spoke about how it is based on the context of what is happening in our lives. So if we grow up, I always fantasize Eastern Europe with, like, women with this beautiful dresses singing opera with goats on the side, and they're milking the goats while they sing opera while the man is, like, carving the road. And I fantasize about what Eastern Europe is. But in Costa Rica, while I was growing up, the newspapers had, like, super curvy Latin women exposing their breasts and their bums, and that was the collective kind of message of what being a woman was. And so I think of, like, these women in my mind, in my fantasy. Obviously, I don't know if that exists or not because I haven't visited, but in my mind, Eastern European women would be, like, singing opera and, like, and that collective subconscious of how it changes with epoch and class and culture. And the media will always have dominance over those ideals and over what we think we should look up to, because it's our context, right? And so even though conscious mind would say, oh, of course I don't want to be like those women in La Teja, that's the newspaper. Of course I don't want to be like those women. My mom would never allow me to wear a bikini, and no, oh my God, that's scandalous. But then who gets so much pleasure from posting Instagram bikini pictures? It's still based on that collective subconscious, right? And it's so, like, healing for me to reveal myself in these sessions, because then I feel like it may give you healing to hear and then do the same. But that's one of the things, like, on one side it's like demonizing something, but then secretly wanting that object to be that object of desire, because that was what was in the collective subconscious. And so it dictates every framework of what it means to be a good wife, of what it means to be a good husband, of what it means to date, of what it means to be a son, a daughter, a parent, of what it means to be a worker, of what it means to be a worker in different areas and a member of the collective. And it's fascinating to me because it's all a lie, in the sense that we are all working. We could all work so hard and make this world so much better. But we have all of these, like, superiority and inferiority games going on, and we can't come together and collaborate. It's fascinating to me. You know, like, when my husband has not been in the field of engineering and he's working like really hard labor, like manual labor, like construction labor, like, and he speaks of how denigrating people look at him because he's somehow not successful. And I think the US has some benefits because the wages are better than in Costa Rica, but like in Costa Rica, people make 12 hours, a 12-hour day, $12. And it's so denigrating. And these people are actually setting the roots for civilization. And I think that the collective subconscious is so twisted. And yeah, the more we can look at how twisted it is and what we think success is, what we think being successful is, the more healing can happen. Because I spoke, and this triggered a lot of discussion when we were together live here at Casa Nexus. Money is the master signifier. The master signifier, that which we are all knowingly or unknowingly worried and thinking about constantly, right? Because it's this agreed method of dealing with life's goods. Towing the car, getting dental work, flying to the States, blah, blah, blah. And there is, and we spoke about this in the workshop, like there is a shift happening with fear and the collective fear. And if it's not fear about COVID, is I having a nightmare? If it's not fear of COVID, it's fear of the vaccine. And it's fear of what the vaccine will do. So the underlying thing is fear. Some people get afraid because they're going to get COVID, and so they decide to take a vaccine and put their trust and safety and their immune well-being into the vaccine. Or some people think that the vaccine is evil, and so they put their trust in not getting the vaccine, but they're still afraid of the vaccine. And do you see what I mean? It's this collective trust in something else, that something outside of us has our best interests in mind. And that's not the case. Whether it be, it doesn't matter where you look at it from. And that actually is so good, because it opens up that archetypal subconscious. Like once you realize that the system is actually not necessarily there to support you, although if you use it well and wisely, it can actually support you. But when you realize that you're alone in this arena, the archetypal subconscious gets opened up. It's like the Pandora box of tools for our evolution and our growth. And the archetypal subconscious is super popular in the new age world right now. Like I still hear people say like, I chose to be a bodhisattva in this life. How about you? As if being a bodhisattva was this like little title that you wear. Or like, I'm pretty sure I was Cleopatra in my past life. And what we forget is the archetypal subconscious is designed, or it's put in place. We were talking about the SD cards and the hard drive system, and the archetypal subconscious is like that major hard drive system that God put into our humanity of how we can become godlike. So the archetypes are patterns that come from the mind of God, and they express themselves differently throughout history, but the pattern is that which brings a revelation. And guides us to the next step on our journey. And the the archetypes get revealed as the more we can like just clean up internally and open space for them to reveal themselves. I love this idea that the archetype gets activated when we stop victimizing ourselves and we become the hero of our journey. So fine, I'll assume this bill and I will pay it in an archetypal way, right? Like this kind of like I'm taking this on with grace. And we spoke also how society and capitalism distorts these archetypal roles because we all come with an archetypal imprint, right? We spoke, and I gave the example of the doctor, somebody who was born in 1994, 1980s, maybe like boomers also. I think boomers were the greatest decline in terms of archetypal patterns. So 1994 is too soon. But let's say you were born as of this century, last century. And there is this innate passion and yearning to heal and to bring beauty and to transform and to be an alchemist and to from pain create space and something new, and you feel that. And the most natural thing to do is to go to medical school because that's what doctors do. And so you enter the educational process, you get in depth, and then fast forward many years later, you're selling pharmaceuticals which benefit you, and the healing is super distorted and broken down. And we have the same with every expression in our culture, in art. I would say even in our career, right? That's why we spoke so much of the shadow in our workshop, in our training. How do our roles get distorted, and how can we redeem them to uproot that which wants to get expressed? And usually that entails facing fear and going beyond it, looking at fear, looking at disgrace, looking at pain, looking at all these forms of unpleasant feelings and going beyond them. It makes me think of what you said, Viv, of like, I took a deep breath. Like instead of immediately going and applying and sending your CV somewhere, it's like, I took a deep breath. Face fear. Look at where you're putting your security in, where you're putting your trust in. And I will always, language to me is fascinating because it can trap us, but it can also free us. And the word courage, and I think I said this at our talk, the word courage coming from the French cœur, which is heart, and that heartful living, wholehearted living. And what wholehearted living brings us to is to a sense of service, right? It's not for me. It's not the selfish thing of like, my archetype is to be, I come from Platonic schools in my past lives, and so I must be this like, what's the word? Prophet, like it's not something selfish. Is how can I be and put all these things in service? And what am I fighting ultimately? Why can't I do it? And that is what Joseph Campbell talks about, especially in the later parts of his work, as the call to adventure. Constantly, life is asking us to come into the arena and go for that adventure. And that adventure is usually a coming back home after this trajectory of uprooting ourselves. And just listen. What is it that wants to emerge? I have here some resources if you want to take a look at them, if that intrigues you. Primarily, I would say if you haven't watched the Finding Joe documentary and this part of archetypes intrigues you, I think this is fantastically done. Super short, it's like an hour, and it talks of Jung's work and Campbell's work and how they work together. Would somebody like to read this quote? Yay, Jenny. Jenny, you have to read it unmuted.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me? I can't. Oh. I can't see all of the, I'm sorry. I can't see the end words for some reason, the way my screen is.
I can read it. That's easy.
Okay.
Okay.
If you do follow your bliss, you put yourself on a kind of track that has been there all the while, waiting for you, and the life that you ought to be living is one that you are living. Follow your bliss and don't be afraid, and doors will open where you didn't know they were going to be.
Thank you. I love hearing other people read because it gets to a different place of me. Like when you said, or when you read, that doors will open where you thought that they were going to be. I really believe in that. That's the mystery, right? So let's say I'm finding this, I'm going to take this part out of the next workshop I do because I'm finally living through the churnings of money. But let's say, I'll just read it. Let's say we didn't have to think about money and the towing of the car and the expenses and whatnot. How would you like to live and spend your time? Who would you be? What would come out of your existence? What would your life be? Like, you know what I'm going to replace this for? What Janelle read to us from Mary Oliver. What will you do with your precious little life? Because that doesn't entail money. I'm going to do that. But anyway, let's take that part out and find out what you want to do. And one of the things that Ramana Maharshi got really popular in England for was that he would tell people, you know, people would come to see him from all over the world to ask questions. And sometimes he would be kind of rude and tell people who had traveled all the way to see him, he would tell them, you know, they asked this question of like, Sri Ramana Maharshi, Namaste, Babaji, I come to you to ask you about the past life, and he would be like, I don't know, go back the way you came from. And so people would be like so disappointed in a way, but then what they started to see was that what he actually meant is trace this back to its origin, right? It's not go back to England, is trace this back to the origin of the question. This sense of like, the life you ought to be living is the life that you are living. Like that's your karma, that's what you have, that's your yoga. And oh my God, I'm thinking right now, we have time of this disciple that Osho or Rajneesh had who came to him with his vice of smoking. Do you say vice? He used to be a heavy smoker and smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And so rather than Osho telling him don't do this or denying that, what he said was, his recommendation to his disciple was, I want you to smoke those 2 packs of cigarettes a day, and I want that to be your spiritual practice. Engage with it as mindfully as you do in other spiritual practices. smell it. Take the time to do that inhale properly, exhale fully, keep tasting it. What emotions arise? Which things do you block? Do this process of smoking the 2 packs of cigarettes a day as your spiritual practice. And that was such a controversial thing, right? And I think it happened similar to Sri Aurobindo because he was a smoker. But what happened was that in the process of doing that so mindfully, he couldn't smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And you never know if that was the intention of the teacher or not, but something worked, right? And so this sense of like, instead of saying, oh no, you shouldn't be smoking this 2 packs of cigarettes, go out and look for something else, be where you are, and what does that teach you? So the life that you ought to be living is the life that you're living. And so I think that builds up to this quote, like we must be willing to let go of the life that we planned, that life that we fantasized, that thing that we thought would happen, right? I will travel from the ashram to Colorado in this crystal vessel. This will be my life. No, like that's not what happened. So what is the life that is waiting to emerge? And the more that we can do that for ourselves and open space for each other, the more society, because we are society. We are society. We are not perhaps the ones who set the laws, but we are the ones who live within those laws. We are the economy. We are. And so the more that we look within and live from that place, from that archetypal center, the more things get structured. And I was so like excited when I met all of you, and so many of you that come from the United States, and I think all of us who are here come from the United States except myself, and seeing like, oh my God, there's people that like talk like me and think like me, and we can create something really cool together. And I don't think that I had experienced that since I left the ashram. And so there's this sense of like, wow, it's not only me, we're all doing this in our own way, and we're creating this grassroots movements. And how would it look like if we all actually live it out? The 6th layer that structure us are samskaras, these tendencies that we bring from our past life experiences, and I say even lifetimes, because this is something that all, I mean, maybe not all, but Buddhism, Advaita talk about of our karma and this trajectory of life, and how the things that we say and think influence our imprint in this reality. Like, this is so subtle, and because we're talking of life and death and what happens in the afterlife is so subtle to think of, but we know that there's this mysterious thread throughout lifetimes, and the way that we process and perceive our reality will influence the next thing. And it influences that next thing as to when we are all together having our conversation, when we close the computer and go to what is happening this Saturday, when we do what is coming up in the near future, but also that future can get expansive as much as we'd like, even to the death of these bodies and what will happen to this spirit, right? So it's super subtle, but it influences us. Like, what if I were to relate to Mike as if he were my rock, and as if he were talking of rock as like, of course he's my rock, and of course I respect him and I love him, but like, the ground of being is God. And when I leave this body, I don't think even the concept of marriage exists. And so if I say to myself things like, what would I do without Mike? and there's things that are super like applicable and cute and apply, like, of course, what would I do without Mike? Thank God. But then there are other things in which there's kind of like a sanskara that gets created. Oh, without Mike, I wouldn't be anything. And so what does that say about me coming into a new life? And this is where I think that a lot of our like sanskaras get created, of like, then I need to look for Mike in the next lifetime, and maybe I'll give birth to him, or maybe he'll give birth to me, or like whatever karmic connection gets created. And again, this is super subtle, and I don't claim to know how sanskaras work. I just get a feel for how we can create tendencies that will later and in the future continue to unfold. So here is where psychoanalysis has a lot of place, even though they seem like different fields of work. Psychoanalysis gives so much credit and like joy to the art of sublimating, like taking a desire and bringing it to its highest level. So I'm talking about this relationship and my marriage with Mike. How can I sublimate that? Because divorce is not the act, right? Like it's not like I'm going to divorce in order to be free. Like then I will find something else to get entangled. The sanskara is not the actual marriage, is the attachment to that entanglement, right? So how do I sublimate this relationship? How do I relate to this soul? How do I relate to this journey with this soul? How do I deal with myself when I'm alone? How do I deal with myself when I'm with him? How can I sublimate this through inner work? And the answer will be completely different for all of us. But even just starting to think about this and how alive our relationships are, or our work is, or our commitments are, and bringing it up a notch, seeing God in everything, remembering that it is all impermanent and therefore a miracle. And therefore a miracle. And that is the dimension of the Atman, where I think this is where words don't do justice, right? Like, what is that force that brings us all together, and that which knows? And I told you the story of the king. I will repeat it, so if you don't remember it. There's this king who is coming into a later stage in life, and he can no longer hold his kingdom. So he's a very democratic king, and he doesn't want to do it as the tradition says. He says, actually, I want to give everybody from this kingdom an opportunity to rule if they want to. Let's make it a democratic process. So he invites anybody and everybody who is interested in the position to come to the castle and drop by for an interview. And so everybody gets invited. Most people show up. The people who show up are shown into the castle and are treated equally as a king, a noblesman, a queen. And they're all dressed, and they're all given delicious food, and everybody starts to get the high from this new situation. Oh, you look so pretty. Oh, I don't like what you're wearing. Oh, she's eating too much. Maybe I should have more. And we get entangled into this banquet and this feast. And hours pass, and everybody is in the banquet enjoying. The king is waiting patiently. Time passes, and there's silence. And so the minister who's with the king goes, and they're ready to summon everybody back into the chamber so that the king can meet them all, and they can start talking about what they came here to do. And the minister comes back with a sad note that everybody left and took the clothes. They were all fed. Now they were tired and ready to go home. And so they forgot why they came in the first place. And I think that can be our lives, right? We come and we enjoy every sense pleasure that is available, which is not something evil. It's part of our humanity, but can we remember why we are here? And so I said that we would have enough time to talk. I will go really quickly through this toolbox because I think we definitely did not get a chance to go through it in last class. And if you are all in agreement and you would like to stay longer, we can have discussion after I'm done, or we can have a second part in the coming days. And we can just meet on Zoom and discuss. Because I really want to go back, I really want to finish what we didn't get to. Depotentiating the sensor and giving power back to the self. Why? Because we want to live with clarity and self-sabotage. The way that I'm speaking is reminding me of this talk of Tara Brach. She's talking about this gathering of Buddhist monks at the mall, and there's one leader and he's like, what do we want? And everybody's like, mindfulness. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Depotentiate the sensor. Why? To end self-sabotage with clarity. And like, what am I talking about? We want to live with grace and with compassion and alignment. That's not something to fight for. But what is clarity and this sense of focus that we all have to direct our willpower where we want to take it? And that's where the essence of Swadhyaya is, you know, what this work of purifying and opening space for the true knowledge of our heart to give back power and to sublimate everything in our lives. Right, Boo-Boo? What then is the heart of the highest truth, the core of knowledge, the wisdom supreme? It is, I am the self, the formless one, by my very nature, I am pervading all. So this toolbox I want to share with you, it's the basics of another workshop that I am going to start teaching, but it gives like the lotus logic, what I was talking in the beginning of we are this lotus in potentia, everybody is it, we all go through this muck of life, no mud, no lotus, right? How do we deal with the muck? So first of all, paying attention to this dream of life and both in sleep and waking life, what is happening? How do we interpret it? With which perspective do we perceive it? I'm going to open the door for Boo Boo, 1 moment. And just as our personal subconscious, thank you for waiting, is absolutely unique, so are our dreams. So there's a common trend in New Age to say, what is the meaning of something? Like, oh, if you dream with a whale, it means that there's this abundant thing coming, or like whatever. And what does it mean to me? And how do I learn to look at the depth of my inner world and what could this be telling me? And asking ourselves those questions. Meditation in the toolbox, because the more we can sit in our own experience, the more we can overcome the censor. There's a point in which the censor kind of like begins to seep through, and all of these parts of the unconscious begin to permeate our mind. And that's why, and I actually would have liked if we had a discussion of this during the teacher training, because it's not like when we sit in quiet, there's all these miracles happening. It is possible, and grace comes through. But usually what comes through is our own subconscious. And the more that we learn to sit with it and embrace it and not run away from it, the more strength and power we have available because of the premise of the beginning. Can I integrate this and really hold it in my heart? So again, no mud, no lotus. Karma, I was talking about interpreting the dream of life, but also karma, like, okay, the car got towed, the clutch went wrong. What's the clutch of my life? How am I shifting gears in my life? These kinds of thoughts, not out of self-criticism and judgment, but like, there's a message. It's not an evil message. I'm not guilty. It's just life. Can I look at this right now before it gets too big? And that's what I mean with purification, is really taking a look and distilling it to its essence. When we recognize that it is our perception, it is our ego, the one that is causing that suffering. There will be pain inherently, but the suffering, I believe that's our spiritual path, right? Like, it's not having access to this wondrous, luminous existence that will come naturally when we look at the shadow. When we can say, oh my God, this is so difficult. I'm going to take a deep breath, as Viv was saying. And that ripens something inside. So I think we can finish here. There's some questions, I will send them, but I really would love to hear and talk together, whether this or if something else, what this spurred in you, if it made more sense today or it didn't. What's up with these themes? And I will end by saying that suffering is a call to investigate what is truly going on. I think I rephrased this from one of Tara Brach's teachings on the meditation and psychotherapy, because it came from RAIN, of like, can we RAIN as an acronym to recognize, allow, identify, and nurture? So it's not this evil response from this evil God that hates us and is sending lightning, but rather it's an opportunity to recognize, reflect, acknowledge, allow, identify where the root is, and nurture it. I will send these questions to you all if you want to do some journaling throughout the weekend, but I would also not want to miss us sharing as colleagues and brothers and sisters in this path. So the floor is open if anybody would like to say something.
So
I gotta run, but thank you.
are you heading out, Coley? So you're saying?
Yeah, I gotta go.
Good to see you.
Hi, Coley.
Bye.
So you were talking about Bhagwan Rajneesh, and it reminded me of one. I think you mentioned the quote, the smoking one. It reminded me a lot of another quote from him. He was talking with an actor, and the actor was asking for directions on how to become a better actor. And his advice was to act as if you're living and to live as if you're acting. And so that was like, the theme just reminded me of that. That we forget, that we forget that we are these, like, we're playing out these roles that have been, prescribed to us, through the different layers of ourself, in however way they were, laid down and cultivated, and that the simple act of remembering that we are acting, that playing out these roles can bring such a sense of awareness into it. Really just almost cuts straight through a lot of the things that are going on in our life, and cut straight to that core of awareness. Like with Sebastian, one of his quotes where he said, am I aware? A question to ask yourself in meditation. And it just reminded me of that.
this that you just said hits a chord for me, because one of the one of the sayings of Shakespeare, or like the school of Shakespeare or whatever it was, they say that life is a stage and we are all the players, and we take it sometimes as if it's not a performance, right? To live as if you are can you say it again?
To act as if you're living, and to live as if you're acting.
I remember so it's just like when he said that, it just reminded me when we were on our first date, we were actually talking about this on a hike. And I think part of the conversation was that, like, when something happens to me in this like societal life structure, it's happening to like the like the character me, not like me. And then to live, so yeah, to live as if you're acting, but like act as if, so like behave as if I am living, like I'm alive, like behave as if I'm alive. And then and like not to take things too seriously. They're not happening to that higher self, they're happening to the role that I'm currently playing in society, typically, which is like this person that's like needing to be financially secure or whatever it might be, you know. So that's what that one reminded me of.
I love it, because it's this paradox between, like, consciousness does not need to be financially secure. Like, consciousness is secure in and of itself, and it's abundant, and yet Nick needs a dental work, right? And so it's this paradox between, I love it. Like, act as if this was actually happening. Pretend. And see what happens. That's really nice. Thank you.
Are you saying, do you have something to add to that? First of all, thank you for all of this. I was so intrigued by what you gave us at Nexus, and to be able to begin, because this very obviously is just a beginning, to explore this even more. It's so fascinating, especially as a mother. Like, I could cry right now, because I wish that I am crying. I wish that I had so much of this raising my kids. And you're all going to be amazing parents one day because of what you know at your young ages. But because it's so, as parents, we don't mean to. You think you're doing the best for your kids or whatever, but we are putting those expectations on them. And it's fascinating to think about. And it's funny, I just going with that, it made me think of my youngest son, and that the intrauterine, I had lost a baby right before I had my youngest son, and he has some issues with the anxiety, and it just made me think, because I always thought, where did that come from? Because I was probably the most laid back with him, like, the fourth child, raising him. But I was anxious in that pregnancy, just afraid that I would lose him. And then when he was born, there was a period, I had a very fast labor. There was a period of time where they could not find his heart rate. And I kind of went into this catatonic state, like in the hospital giving birth to him, where my father-in-law had passed away, and a very special man, the year the winter before, and I had this vision of my father-in-law handing me this baby. And so I like came out of this state, and my doctor, who was rushing to get there, arrived, and the nurses were freaking out because they didn't have his heartbeat. And my doctor got there, and he knew me and knew that I had had my other kids without a problem. And he was just like, nope, right now, she's gonna push this guy out and whatever. And so, and everything ended up being fine. But I just, that just makes me think all of that anxiety around like the whole process. You wonder like how that, because all of this, I believe in, that the karmic, like, not the karmic, what is it? When you, even in my family, like we've driven out west, and my brother's like, I think I was a Pony Express, driver, like in a former life, like, and we seriously believe this. I've traveled and thought, like, I feel like I've been in this place before. I think we've all had those experiences, and I don't know, but I know that I do. But anyway, this is so fascinating. And it's just, I know, just like the tip of all that there is. And it's so cool to begin to share this in really subtle ways, like with my classes, and because it's going very deep, and there's just not a lot of time to do that in an hour session. But I just thank you. And Nick and Viv, like you guys, this started in the first 300 hour, our first little session really being around you too. And then you've just carried this on, Prema. Like it's really cool. And I just feel grateful to know all of you, and I thank you.
Likewise, Jenny. I really value what you said, and it makes me think of this beauty in the process of acknowledging and growing and taking responsibility, and at the same time knowing that we did the best we could, and like with the resources that we had, and that was part of the karma, and that was part of what needed to happen in order for your son to go through what he's going through now, right? And that there is no place other than right now and how it is happening right now. And we get the information when we are ready to receive it and process it and make amends. Not because we were evil, because we want to live with love and integrity and cohesion. So I know that as you do this work, you're speaking for all of the mothers, really, and what a blessing that is.
Thank you.
Good luck, bad luck, who knows?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so great.
Exactly.
So true.
This made me realize this workshop used to be 4 hours, because I used to then like break in right now, and then we would come back for a Buddhist psychology on like the 10 and noble paths, 10 steps. And I just realized I want to do that because the discussions are so valuable, and it's where a lot of this comes to life. So what I will do is, because I said we would end at 12:30, what I will do is send an email to the people that signed up for Wednesday 12, make it a 4 hour, and then if you have time to join, you can join in for the discussion. And because this is definitely, maybe I could do 2 workshops and have people pay $30 for each, and that would be better. But we definitely can take this so much more deeply, and even like have guide sessions and whatnot. Anyway, I appreciate all of you coming and showing up and sharing this energy field. I look forward to a more integrative discussion next Wednesday, not this Wednesday, next Wednesday, 12th. And I really love you all. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jenny.
we're so thankful that you included all of us in this offering, and it has been like super beneficial spiritually, just to remember, right? The remembering through the forgetfulness, and also it's been really nice to see you guys just on a personal, like friendly level. It's nice to see your faces, and it's also very inspiring how you can carry this energy and these teachings through this online module, and it's like very powerful, and it's so thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Who is FQ?
I don't know.
Ava?
Oh, yeah. Hey, Prema, it's me.
Ava?
I'm so sorry I missed it. Like, I just arrived in Germany last night,
Welcome.
so I'm completely like out of like space and time, and I have no idea what's the time in Costa Rica right now.
Of course.
And
Fine.
so I'm like, but you just said that you're gonna like do another session, so I'll be like in
Right
next
on.
time.
Awesome.
Oh, I just see. I don't even share my. How is this like working? Okay, well, I'm kind of like over. Oh no, I got it. I got it. Hey. Hey, everybody. Yeah, so I've just seen your message, so I was like, oh, I'm gonna join the meeting and see what they're like doing, but now I like realized that it's like over, that I missed everything. But yeah, I'll be like super glad to join next time, Prima.
Yeah, join on Wednesday 12th.
Wednesday 12th? Well, I have work, but I try.
It's in the evening, but it will probably be like your midnight or something.
Yeah.
Or you can watch the
Oh yeah, that will be during the night for me then. Well, we'll see. Maybe I'm still awake. If I'm still awake.
We were also talking about starting a book group. On the
Starting what?
A book group.
Oh yeah.
And the body keeps the
Pretty
score.
cool.
That could happen. Anyway, it's nice to see you. Even if at the end.
You guys too.
It'd be cool to do a proper book club.
Weekend.
It'd be neat to do a proper book club and be able to, you know, as a collective decide, oh yeah, let's read this book this month, then we'll get together at the end of the month and talk about it.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, that's a cool idea, I think.
Do you want to organize it?
Well, I have to, not really, like, seriously. I have to start working again on Monday. If I can show you a picture of, like, the situation of my life right now, it's just, wow. So I need to, like, get my shit together here and, like, make my mind up to get, like, back to work and... Yeah, but I would love to read a book.
Amazing.
You organize it and send me the picture, and then
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send out an invitation. That'll be fun.
All right.
And before we get out of here, Prem, I wanted to mention, you were mentioning really enjoying Eastern European, like fantasies of Eastern Europe. There's a band called, they're a Ukrainian folk group called Daka Braka. Have you heard of them? So they're fantastic. They're Ukrainian. They're I think it's a group of women and one guy.
And they're all in like the dress.
Yeah, they're in like the proper like dress and they sing in Ukrainian. It's fantastic. Very, very beautiful. Yeah, I think you'd really enjoy it. Daka Braka, DHKA.
We'll text it to you.
Yeah, I can message it. It's a very complicated spelling.
Oh, I'm not finding it, so please send it. Thank you. Thank you for the recommendation. Yeah, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, whether it's your evening or your morning, and that we can forget of this as a conceptual, like structural piece that we need to intellectualize about. or off and just live from the heart.
Thank you so much.
Have a beautiful weekend.
Great to see you all.
Likewise. Bye.